They mocked a quiet woman at a small town coffee shop, laughed at the bold tattoo inked on her forearm for those who never returned. Some called it attention seeking, others whispered something worse. What they didn't know was that the ink wasn't decoration. It was a memorial. Moments later, a Navy SEAL commander stepped through the door. He saw the tattoo, froze, and then, before anyone could react, saluted her. The room fell silent, and everything changed. Direct hit before we begin. Where are you watching from today? Comment below. Let's connect. Globe showing Europe, Africa, and if stories like this move you, please consider subscribing so more people can experience these true reminders of silent strength. She didn't flinch when the laughter began. It rose from the back corner of the coffee shop, sharp, mocking, careless. A group of off-duty workers clustered around a table, chuckling as if they had found the day's entertainment. Their eyes passed over her like she was just another stranger, too quiet, too plain, too easy to belittle. The first man spoke loud enough for the room to hear. Nice tattoo. Let me guess, Pinterest inspiration? A few heads turned. A woman looked down at her cup, wishing she hadn't heard. She lifted her eyes slowly, her expression unreadable. On her forearm, black ink stretched across pale skin, for those who never returned. Her hands didn't tremble. Her breathing didn't change. Only her silence answered. But inside, a memory flickered like fire swallowing oxygen. Rotors slicing through desert heat, the copper smell of blood, a broken voice calling her name through static-laced radio. She closed her eyes for half a second. She had already buried harsher words. He smirked, lifting his coffee cup. What, are you like a fan of war movies or something? No one spoke up. Not yet. Some saw the disrespect. Others avoided eye contact, the way people do when truth feels uncomfortable. She simply placed a folded 20 on the counter and turned toward the door, not to run, not to escape, just to leave this place the way she lived, quietly, without spectacle. But destiny had other plans. Because as she reached for the door handle, the bell chimed above her. Not because she pushed it, but because someone else stepped inside. His boots struck the floor with precise, measured gravity, the kind of posture that silence respects, the kind of man whose presence shifted the air the moment he entered. He wore no uniform, no rank, but he didn't need them. Scars mapped across his hands. Storm gray eyes scanned the room briefly before landing on her arm. The tattoo. He stopped, his jaw clenched, and then he saluted. Not a nod, not a gesture of casual acknowledgement, but a deliberate, full salute. The room froze. The laughter died so fast it left an echo. She remained still, eyes locked with his. She didn't return the salute, not because she didn't deserve it, but because she had sworn once that she would only ever salute those she could no longer stand beside. The man lowered his hand slowly, and in that breath of silence that followed, everyone finally began to understand. Some ink is decoration. His voice finally broke through the heavy quiet. But some ink is blood. No one dared respond. She stood motionless, her hand still near the door, the weight of that salute pressing deeper than any insult ever could. The air in the café felt changed somehow, denser, forced into silence by the undeniable truth spoken without aggression. Not a single person dared to move, but in her mind, a different world rose up. Dust filled suns, scorched, painted in desert tan and rust. A memory, sharp as shrapnel. Her name was Elena Hayes, though few said it aloud now. Most simply called her Doc. For 7 years she had served as a Navy combat medic, deployed across unforgiving terrains where hope felt like a luxury and fear became survival instinct. She remembered the smell of burning fuel mixed with blood, the weight of her gear digging into her shoulders, and the endless thudding of helicopter blades that always sounded like a heartbeat, waging war against silence. Her fingers remembered more than her words ever could the trembling hand of Corporal James Reyna moments before he slipped away, the cracked lips of Lieutenant Brooks whispering, "Just get them home, promise me." The echo of that promise clutched against her chest like a final breath. She had watched too many lives fade beneath her palms, fought to restart hearts even when her own was breaking. And when the mission ended, when she returned at last, it wasn't medals she brought back. It was the faces of the 12 souls she couldn't save. Their names were inked in her memory first, and only later into her skin. Each stroke of her tattoo was a requiem for those who never returned, and she would never explain it to strangers who hadn't earned the right to understand. The commander stepped forward now, slow enough to give the moment dignity. He wasn't smiling. Respect does not come dressed in sentiment. His voice held gravity. "You served," he said simply. It wasn't a question. She nodded once, barely visible. He exhaled, "Where?" Someone muttered from the back, half curiosity, half shame. Another silence fell before Alina spoke, her words steady. "Kanar Province, 2013 to 2017. The room registered the weight of that region like a thunderclap hidden beneath skin. Those in uniform, or who were close to someone who served, knew what that meant. Kanar was not just a deployment. It was a crucible. Few returned untouched. Some didn't return at all. The same man who had mocked her tattoo shifted uncomfortably. Eyes darted. Someone looked down at their shoes. Still, no one apologized. Not yet. She didn't need their remorse. She didn't want their gratitude. What she wanted, what she always wanted, was quiet. Because silence was the only thing that didn't pretend to understand what her sacrifice cost. She moved toward the counter, intending to leave, but the barista stepped back. Eyes glossy, hands trembling. The cup she had ordered remained untouched. A napkin had been placed beneath it, and on it, someone had drawn a shaky line through the word charge. It was free now, but she didn't reach for it. Her silent dignity was not for sale. Behind her, the commander turned his gaze on the group who had laughed. His stare bore weight, but he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. One of them finally broke. I didn't know," the man muttered. Alina looked over her shoulder, then listened more. She said, "No aggression. Just truth." The commander glanced at her wrist. A small braided silver bracelet, worn from weather and time. The kind usually handed out after a fallen soldier's name is etched onto a memorial wall. He recognized it instantly. He straightened once more. "Hayes," he said quietly, "I knew your team." She froze. He stepped closer, his voice heavy with a history the others could not see. "My platoon crossed paths with 3rd Medical on the ridge outside Watapur. You stabilized 4 of ours before birds could reach us. We heard the way you fought to hold that line." Her jaw tightened. The memory was a blur of smoke and screams. His next words broke the unseen dam in the room. "Your actions saved my brother." People looked up. "My blood brother," he added, voice steadier now. "I wouldn't be here if not for you." Something shifted visibly in Alina's eyes, not pride, not relief, but a quiet release. A burden temporarily lifted. The café remained unnaturally still, holding collective breath. People exchanged glances, some filled with shame, some with dawning respect. Yet still no apology, only silence, and that silence spoke volumes. Alina adjusted the strap of her worn-out bag. Years of service had altered how she moved, calculated steps, economy of motion. As she turned toward the exit, she paused beside the table of those who laughed at her earlier. She set a small military coin on their table, a glint of gold and navy blue, its edges worn. "Picked that up the day we lost Sergeant Reyna," she said softly. "I didn't earn it, he did, but I carry it so no one forgets." She walked away, and nobody dared touch the coin. The cold morning air carried the weight of a promise as Alina approached the memorial grounds. The sky had not yet fully brightened, painted in muted shades of blue and ash. Dew clung to the grass like unshed tears. Rows of boots were placed before etched black stones, each pair representing a life lived in service, and one no longer walking among them. She paused at the gate. A small cluster of people had already gathered, mostly veterans, some family members. No media, no applause, just quiet presence. No one noticed her at first, and she preferred it that way. The SEAL commander approached from the far side, hands behind his back. He didn't speak, but when their eyes met, he nodded. A nod not of recognition, but of shared grief. Then something happened. The same group from the café, those who had laughed, stood near the back, invited by the café owner, who had quietly reached out the night before, saying simply, "Come if you wish to understand." They weren't sure how to behave. They didn't wear guilt on their faces. They wore awakening, a kind of stunned humility. They noticed Elena. For a moment, the world seemed to still. She passed them without acknowledgement. Because this day wasn't about them. It was about 12 names. The commander stepped toward the central monument. On a marble plinth, the words, "Their sacrifice echoes in our freedom," were engraved. A bell rang across the grounds. No sound from instruments, no ceremonial rifles, just names. One by one, he read them aloud, and when he reached Sergeant James Reyna, Elena stepped forward. She removed the military coin from her pocket, the one born of loss, not victory. She placed it silently beneath his engraved name, then stood back, hands at her sides, shoulders level, eyes steady. A woman in the gathering, dressed in civilian clothes, stepped forward unexpectedly. Her voice shook. "Sergeant Reyna was my son," she said quietly. "I never got to know who was there in his last moments, until now." She turned to Elena. "What did you say to him at the end?" Elena's lips parted, and for the first time since she had returned from duty, she allowed herself to look directly into the eyes of someone who had lost what she carried. She took a slow breath. "I told him," her voice softened, nearly breaking, "I told him that he had done enough, that he could rest, and that I would carry him home." The mother nodded. Tears ran silently down her cheeks. She did not hug Elena. She simply put a hand over her heart. Elena returned the gesture. Everyone felt it then, a shift, like the earth itself acknowledging a promise kept. The commander stepped forward and spoke in a tone that carried across hearts rather than ears. "You do not have to wear a uniform to be a soldier your whole life. Sometimes the uniform becomes your skin." His words settled like dust after battle. Dozens of veterans, each with their own silent weight, stepped forward. One by one, they formed a line facing Elena. And then, without command or gesture, they saluted. Not because of rank, not because of duty, but because sometimes the highest honor belongs not to the loudest soldier, but to the one who never stopped fighting, even after coming home. And then a quieter form of honor followed. Those who had laughed at her the day before stepped forward last. They didn't speak. They didn't attempt apology in words unworthy of the moment. They simply knelt beside the coin she had placed. Hands on their knees, heads lowered, not as penance, but as understanding. She did not smile. She did not cry. But something inside her, a door long sealed, shifted slightly open. The burden was still hers. It always would be. But now she did not carry it alone. The sun broke the horizon then, light spilling across the memorial, kissing each engraved name as though dawn itself bowed in respect. As people began to disperse, the commander approached her again. "You never told me why the tattoo," he said softly, glancing at the ink on her forearm. Elena looked at the words one last time, "For those who never returned." Her answer came quietly. "They gave their silence. The least I can give is a voice." The commander nodded once. "If you ever decide to speak, to share their stories, we'll stand with you." She looked around at the faces, at the kneeling men, at the mother. at strangers who now understood without being told. For the first time, she replied, "Maybe I won't have to speak alone." Honor is not always worn in metals. Sometimes it's inked into skin, carved into memory, or carried in silence. And sometimes the most unassuming person in the room is the one who has given the most of themselves. Let this remind us, never assume the quiet carry little. Some carry the weight of entire wars. Speech balloon, if this story moved you, share what part of Elena's journey stayed with you read. And if you believe in honoring those who serve, please subscribe so more stories of silent strength can be told. Thank you for standing witness today, military for those who never returned and for those who still carry them.